You ever get that feeling? Like you're being swept away, like you're caught in a current?
Oh,
Just constant change, like fire hose of information. Like, whoa, hold on a second.
yeah, trying to keep up with it all.
It's a lot. Tech breakthroughs,
Yeah.
global, whatchamacallits, trying to get a grip on it.
Finding a good perspective, that helps.
Right, someone who can cut through the noise.
See the bigger picture.
Exactly, and that's where Peter Drucker comes in.
Ah, Drucker. Always ahead of the curve.
Seriously, born in the Habsburg Empire, for crying out loud.
And writing about management, what, all the way to Enron?
That's like a century of watching the world change.
He really saw things coming, didn't he?
Visionary, really.
What I find so fascinating about Drucker, though, is how he connected the dots.
Yeah.
Not just economics, not just management,
Mm-mm.
sociology, politics, everything.
He was putting it all together.
To see the big picture, the forces at play.
And that's what we're doing today, You sent over these excerpts from Managing in the Next Society.
Oh, right, his book.
And we're going deep. Deep dive into Drucker's thinking about, well, the next society.
Direct line to some pretty pivotal shifts.
You covered a lot of ground, by the way. The information society, e-commerce, leadership, knowledge workers.
Healthcare, demographics, the global economy, even fish farming.
Fish farming.
Yeah, he mentioned it.
Anyway, the point is we're pulling out the big stuff.
The aha moments.
The key forces shaping the future, right? So you don't have to wade through all the details.
So shortcut.
Exactly. So Drucker, he had some pretty interesting ideas about the information revolution.
He did. He saw it as part of a pattern, actually.
Like a historical thing.
Yeah, like earlier technological shifts. Like way back, even Gutenberg's printing press.
The printing press. That's old school.
But revolutionary, right?
Totally.
And some game-changing inventions. They took a while to really take hold.
Like what?
Like the steamboat. 30, 40 years for the impact to really hit.
Makes sense.
Even more recent stuff, the CD-ROM. Didn't change everything overnight.
Lag time, huh?
Exactly. But then you have something like the railroad.
Okay, yeah, the railroad.
That was a game changer from the get-go. 1829, boom. Economy, society, politics, everything.
Changed the landscape.
Totally. And for the information revolution, Drucker saw e-commerce playing that role.
E-commerce? You mean like buying stuff online?
That's part of it, but bigger. Think of it like the railroad of the information age.
A new set of tracks.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting for you.
Okay, I'm listening.
E-commerce, it changes the whole idea of distance.
Distance.
In economics, yeah. It basically creates a single global market.
So no more borders.
Not in the same way. Those barriers that used to define markets, they're disappearing.
So for me, what does that actually mean?
Well, think about listeners' area of interest. Local monopolies.
Yeah.
They're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And even smaller players, they can reach a global audience.
If they offer something unique. Right.
Exactly. Drucker has these great examples, like a customer finding a better supplier in Europe.
Air freight. Boom.
Or even, get this, Amazon getting its first U.S. order for management challenges for the 21st century from Argentina.
Wow, really?
Yeah, the world is shrinking.
No borders, huh?
And it wasn't just goods. Drucker saw e-commerce exploding in job recruitment.
Oh, yeah, jobs.
Professional, managerial positions. Early 2000s, almost half of the world's largest companies were recruiting online.
That's a huge shift.
It's a whole new labor market, global and digital.
Which means, it changes everything. Consumers, industries, the whole shebang.
Consumer habits, how people save money,
Yeah.
entire industries transforming. And it's not just the U.S.
A global phenomenon.
Across the developed world, and even in rapidly developing economies like China.
It's like the whole world is rewiring itself.
Exactly.
It's funny, though. Back in the 90s, everyone was talking about the new economy, all excited.
Right, the dot-com boom.
And Drucker, he was a little more cautious, wasn't he?
Well, he had seen this kind of hype before.
Oh, right, the 29 crash.
He was a trainee then. And that experience, it stayed with him.
So he saw the parallels.
Between the new economy talk and the perpetual prosperity stuff before the crash, different words, same assumptions.
History repeating itself.
Maybe. He also pointed out two big things that were flipping the script.
Oh, yeah, like what?
One, the shrinking young population. He said it hadn't happened like that since like 1700.
Wow.
And two, manufacturing declining as the big job creator.
But it's still important, right?
Economically, less so. Politically, maybe even more.
Interesting. What about future tech breakthroughs? Where did he see that going?
Actually, he thought they'd come from outside information technology.
Really?
She specifically mentioned biotechnology, even fish farming.
Fish farming, again.
He saw potential there.
Yeah.
Drucker also made a distinction about how the information revolution was changing work itself.
Okay, how so?
He said up to that point it was mostly about efficiency,
Streamlining things.
like automating back office stuff in a brokerage firm. Faster, cheaper, but not really different.
Same old work, just quicker.
He saw the CD-ROM as a rare exception. The way it presented information, it was actually changing how we interact with it.
Interesting.
And he even talked about the psychological impact, like how kids were learning computer skills so young.
Digital natives.
Right. And he wondered if that was part of what people were calling the crisis of American education.
Like a mismatch between how we teach and how kids learn.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It raises a question for you, actually,
Yeah.
about how tech is shaping not just the economy, but how we learn and grow.
That's a good point. Makes you think.
It does. Now, a big part of Drucker's thinking was this concept of the next society.
Next society, huh?
And for him, it was all about knowledge, a knowledge society.
Okay, so what did he mean by knowledge society? What makes it different?
He talked about 3 key features. 1, it's borderless.
And knowledge travels fast.
Exactly. 2, upward mobility. Education and knowledge are the keys.
So if you learn, you can move up.
Right. And 3, the risk and reward.
Yeah.
Knowledge is the main way to create wealth, but it's not guaranteed. It's up to you to learn and use it.
So it's more individual responsibility.
In a way, yes. And knowledge, it's different from, say, owning land or a factory.
How so?
You can't inherit it. You have to earn it, build it yourself.
So wealth is created differently.
And power shifts, too.
Yeah.
He even called knowledge workers the new capitalists.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they own the means of production, their knowledge and skills, and through pensions and mutual funds, they're becoming the majority shareholders in companies.
That's a big change.
It is, but he also said that knowledge is most powerful when it's used within an organization.
So you can't just be a lone wolf.
You need collaboration, structure. That's how knowledge workers get things done.
Teamwork.
Exactly. And Drucker made another point. Knowledge workers, men or women, they're judged on their results.
What they can do, not who they are.
Right. He even quotes Maria Montessori. She said she was recognized as a doctor because of her skill, not because she was a woman.
That's a good point. He also talked about different kinds of knowledge workers, right?
Yeah, he made a distinction between high knowledge workers and knowledge technologists.
So like doctors versus, say, programmers.
Kind of. Doctors, lawyers, they deal with abstract knowledge. Knowledge technologists, like X-ray techs or software developers, they apply more concrete, codified knowledge. And that second group, it was growing rapidly.
The tech folks.
Right. And for knowledge workers, work is more than just a job.
It's their life.
Exactly. Money isn't the only measure of success.
It's about purpose.
And he talked about this interesting phenomenon. Successful knowledge workers, they hit a plateau sometimes.
A plateau, like a midlife crisis.
Sort of. In their 40s, they've achieved a lot, but then what?
They need something more.
Right. And he said it was important for them to find non-competitive things outside work.
Hobbies, interests.
Things that keep them growing, keep them fulfilled. But here's the thing. Managing these knowledge workers, it's different. For starters, how do you measure their productivity? Knowledge isn't like widgets.
It's harder to quantify.
Drucker said, forget the top-down metrics. Talk to the workers.
Ask them.
Yeah, ask them what they're good at, what's expected of them, what information they need.
So more of a conversation.
Exactly. And he wasn't a fan of relying too much on financial incentives.
Like stock options.
He called them bribes, almost.
Bribes,
Yeah,
really.
it can backfire. He told this story about a research team that left a company because management only cared about the stock price.
They weren't valued for their work.
Exactly. And for some really key people, he suggested they might be better off as partners or contractors.
Not traditional employees.
Recognize their unique value. He also talked about outsourcing,
Yeah, that's a big one.
but not just the usual stuff. He saw companies outsourcing the management of their employees
Wait, what?
through these things called professional employer organizations, PEOs.
PEOs. Never heard of those.
They're like co-employers, handle HR stuff.
So the company can focus on its core business.
Exactly. Adecco, Exult, these companies were booming. BP Amoco, Unisys, they were using PEOs.
Huh. And what's interesting is employees under PEOs, they were often happier.
Right, you'd think it would be the opposite. But Drucker thought it was because PEOs were better at understanding those specialized knowledge worker roles.
They were valued for their skills.
Exactly. And this leads to a key point he made. It's not about finding better people.
But getting more out of the people you have.
Yes, through good management. He used the analogy of a university.
Okay, how so?
The university structure, it's there to support the professors.
The teachers and researchers.
Right. Or a symphony orchestra, it serves the musicians.
Makes
The
sense.
system enables the talent.
And temps, PEOs, they free up managers to do that.
To build relationships, like a good department head or a conductor.
To actually lead.
Exactly. Now let's talk about how Drucker saw all this impacting business and the economy.
Okay, hit me.
Well, remember that book about the never-ending stock market boom?
The one right before the 29 crash.
Yeah. Drucker saw the same kind of hype with the new economy. And he was skeptical.
He wasn't buying it?
He said it wasn't really a new economy yet. It was like the early days of the railroad.
The potential was there, but...
But the full impact hadn't hit yet. Interestingly, he thought the internet would have an even bigger impact outside of business.
Really? Where?
Higher education. Specifically, continuing education for adults.
Online learning.
Exactly. He saw that as a huge growth area.
Knowledge changing so fast, people need to keep learning.
Right. He also told this story about the guy who invented Novocaine.
Novocaine.
The guy was shocked that it was mostly used for, like, dental work.
Not major surgery.
Nope. Which illustrates a point Drucker made about innovation. You never know where it's going to end up.
Things take on a life of their own.
Exactly. And he had this radical idea about companies like Microsoft.
Like what?
He thought they might be better off broken up, like Standard Oil or IBM.
Broken up? Why?
He said big companies get stuck in their ways.
Like Rockefeller with kerosene, even as cars were taking off.
Or IBM with punch cards, ignoring the PC revolution.
So don't cling to the past.
Right. Looking ahead, Drucker saw social issues becoming more important than economics.
More important? Why?
Aging populations, declining birth rates. Those were the big drivers.
Especially in developed countries.
Except the U.S., because of immigration.
Right. He also talked about this manufacturing paradox.
Yes. Output going up, but employment going down.
Because of automation, right?
Exactly. Like what happened with agriculture.
So where are the jobs going to come from?
He saw a shift from manufacturing companies to knowledge companies based on distribution.
What does that even mean?
Well, making stuff was becoming less important. It was all about getting it to the customer.
Like Amazon.
Exactly. And he challenged the idea of profit centers within a company.
Profit centers.
He said they're a myth. Profit only comes from the customer, from the outside.
Everything else is a cost.
Exactly. So what's important is outside information about customers, markets, distribution.
Not just internal data.
He even pointed to the service trade surplus in the U.S. It was bigger than people thought because they weren't measuring it right.
So you need both kinds of information.
And you need to integrate them.
Makes sense.
And e-commerce, it was changing the game even more.
Wow.
It separated selling and buying.
Yeah.
And making and selling.
So what are companies selling then?
What they can deliver, not just what they make.
Interesting.
He also saw potential for hybrid models. Online selling with local delivery points.
Like those kiosks you see now.
Exactly. He actually used the example of Japanese 7-Elevens.
7-Elevens for online deliveries.
It was just an example.
Okay, fair enough.
Now, Drucker, he was pretty blunt about America's self-image as the entrepreneurial leader.
Oh, yeah. What'd he say?
He called it a delusion.
A delusion, whoa.
He said countries like Korea and Taiwan were doing it better.
Really? Why?
He thought American businesses relied too much on individual genius.
The lone inventor in the garage.
Right. But in places like Japan and Korea, it was more of a system.
A process, a discipline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he said successful innovation is about letting go of the past, not defending it.
Don't be afraid to move on.
He also talked about 4 pitfalls for entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah. What were they?
1, when your product finds success in a different market than you planned.
And you miss the opportunity. Like the Novocaine guy.
Exactly. 2, the cash crunch from growing too fast.
That's a classic.
3, the management crunch. Your little startup, it can't handle the growth.
You need a bigger boat.
4, not building a management team early enough. The founder tries to do it all.
Too many hats.
He also said big companies needed to foster internal entrepreneurship.
To stay innovative.
And he saw social entrepreneurship becoming more important.
Making a difference, not just a profit.
And he stressed the need for better management in nonprofits.
They're a key part of the next society.
Especially in cities. He pointed out how fast cities were growing.
Urbanization.
And the challenge of building communities there. Government programs weren't enough.
You need people working together.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears to governance and society.
Okay, lead the way.
Drucker saw corporate governance changing. Big time.
How so?
More power to the owners,
You mean the shareholders?
especially institutional investors, pension funds,
Mm.
and boards needed more financial expertise.
To understand the business, not just the numbers.
Right. He also made this prediction about CFOs and CIOs.
Well, finance and tech guys?
Yeah. He said neither one really understood information the way CEOs needed it.
So what, they needed a new kind of executive?
He thought so. Someone focused on the big picture of information,
The information guru.
something like that. And CEOs, they had to deal with so many conflicting demands.
Short-term versus long-term. Continuity versus change.
Plus, they had to work with people they couldn't control. Partners, stakeholders. It took marketing skills and understanding of values.
So not just a command and control style anymore?
Right. And the pace of change, it was only getting faster.
So policies had to adapt faster, too.
Exactly. And Drucker said it was crucial to understand who was really in charge.
With all the complexity, it's hard to tell sometimes.
He also talked about mass capitalism,
What's that?
everyone owning stocks through mutual funds and pensions.
So a lot more people have a stake in the system.
But how do you govern that? It was a new phenomenon. And he emphasized the third sector.
Nonprofits, civil society.
Essential, he said. And then there were demographics, aging populations, fewer young people.
Except in the U.S. because of immigration.
Right. He talked about the political impact of that, Social Security, healthcare, immigration debates.
Those are big issues.
He also saw societies and markets fragmenting.
Because people are so different.
In a way, yes, but it also creates opportunities, niche markets for specific age groups.
Like those ads targeted at seniors.
Exactly. And get this, he said the lifespan of businesses was shrinking.
But people were living longer.
Knowledge workers, yes.
He.
He revisited the manufacturing paradox, too.
More output, fewer jobs.
And he saw political consequences. Protectionism, subsidies, trade barriers.
Trying to save those manufacturing jobs.
But ironically, he said, manufacturing was becoming more politically influential
Even with fewer workers.
because they were a more unified interest group.
Makes sense.
He also talked about industry lines blurring. Knowledge from different areas was becoming essential.
So companies were moving into unexpected areas.
Like that example with GM, thinking about buying cars for people, any brand.
To leverage their financing and distribution.
Exactly. And new organizational forms were emerging.
Not just the traditional company model.
Networks, alliances, outsourcing arrangements.
More flexible, more adaptable.
Drucker's really stressed the need for top management to think long-term,
Not just about the next quarter's profit.
especially when it came to things like retirement benefits.
Those have a long tail.
And he questioned the CEO Superman idea.
The one guy who does it all.
He said you need a strong team, clear priorities, like Jack Welch at GE.
He had that structured approach.
Right. And companies needed to experiment, he said,
With new forms, new structures.
especially for collaborations. He also made this interesting observation about information.
Okay, go on.
He said the information revolution had created tons of internal data,
Companies swimming in data.
but they might understand the outside world less.
Because external information is harder to measure.
Right. It's not always neat and tidy.
So more data doesn't always mean more knowledge.
Exactly. And finally, he brought up Schumpeter's theory of creative destruction.
Creative destruction.
The idea that innovation destroys the old to make way for the new.
The constant churn of progress.
And Drucker thought that was becoming even more relevant. So there you have it.
Drucker's managing in the next society. A lot to unpack, huh?
We covered a lot of ground. Knowledge society, e-commerce, managing knowledge workers.
Changes in business, the economy, demographics, social trends.
It's a framework for understanding the world, for cutting through the noise and seeing the important stuff.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to ponder.
I'm all ears.
Drucker talked a lot about knowledge workers, living longer, needing purpose. But what about the organizations?
Good question.
What new kinds of organizations, collaborations might emerge to support them, to really take advantage of their skills and their longevity?
Something to think about.
Definitely. It might be the key to navigating the next society, and maybe a good place to start your own deep dive into Drucker's work.
I think he'd approve.
He probably would. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning.
And keep adapting.
You got it.
See you later.